Welcome to the show that puts you at the centre of the national conversation about the issues that matter to you most. Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng remain unapologetic about their pursuit of economic growth. But tonight, the pound is still struggling, forcing the Bank of England to suggest that it may need to intervene. The scale of the Prime Minister's plan is unlike anything seen in decades. It's a huge gamble for the country. I'm Trevor Phillips, and this is The Great Debate. Good evening. Each week we get to the heart of the issue dominating the headlines. Tonight, it's clear that the market's reaction to Liz Truss's economic plan is not for the faint-hearted. At one point, the pound fell to its lowest level since decimalisation. But the Prime Minister and the Chancellor insist that their plan to boost growth through tax cuts and greater borrowing is the right course of action. Our viewers panel from across the UK are here. They'll react with their stories and they'll have their say. Joining us in the studio this week are David Gauke, former Conservative Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and McElvoy, Executive Editor of The Economist, Gerard, Lyons, Chief Economic Strategist at NetWealth, and Mick, Lynch, General Secretary of the RMT. So let's take a look at the big question facing us this week. Is Liz Truss taking too many risks with our money?
We promised a new approach for a new era. We promised to release the enormous potential of this country.
We're waking up to a new record low for the pound again. It's fallen to a new low against the US dollar.
I can't remember another time that we've had a response to a budget that's been anything like this.
You're prepared to be unpopular, aren't you?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Well, let's start with our viewers panel, as always, and I want to talk to Lee Deeble. Lee, you were, I think, a Conservative supporter. What did you make of last Friday?
Well, I'm disturbed. It visually looks like short-term economics for short-term gains by this Prime Minister. It really does. So my question would be, does the panel think there will be our children and grandchildren picking up the tab for the debt accrued by COVID and the energy crisis?
So your big thing is about the future that this leaves your children and grandchildren with?
It is. It's a tax cut for the most wealthiest does nothing for the average person in the UK with children and grandchildren. And they're the ones I think they're going to pick up this debt.
All right. Thank you, Lee. Let's talk to Amanda Coleman. Amanda, you run a small business in Wigan, I think. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, my problem is a bit more here and now, in that I set up just around the time of COVID, got no support because I wasn't eligible at that point. And this uncertainty is not good for small business and small businesses where, you know, they're one or a few people. They underpin a lot of communities. So my big concern is the basically going to have to increase costs in order to manage. And also I do some work overseas, and that is a huge concern as well with what's been happening today.
Thank you, Amanda. That's your situation. You've got a question for our panel, for our programme.
I do, and it's how do small businesses get heard during this crisis? And also, will this plan cause the pound to continue to drop?
The question that she has about tonight is, will this plan cause the pound to continue to drop? Gerard, Lyons.
Well, I've been pessimistic about the pound for a while. Back in February, I thought we would see a major sterling devaluation this year, and we have seen a weaker pound. Now, we're in a situation where the pound is now so incredibly cheap. If you were to take a longer-term view, you would think this might be a good time to look at the UK. But, of course, we have so much uncertainty at the moment, it's likely that we'll see a period of further turbulence and maybe weakness. But it's very weak at the moment. But coming back to bringing those questions together, what we've seen in the last few days is a period of uncertainty, partly because I would say the Chancellor in his mini-budget, and to some extent the Bank of England last week, didn't manage expectations. But I think the Chancellor, even though he didn't do everything right last Friday, for instance, cutting the top rate of tax didn't make sense to me, I think he is right to try and turn the agenda around and to have a pro-growth strategy. And that comes back to answering these questions.
I want to come back to the wider issue, but I guess right now, tonight, people are looking at that graph of the pound against the dollar and indeed against the euro. What do you think, Anne McElvoy? What's the Economist's view on this?
I think it's always very difficult to really guess where currency markets will settle after a big event like this. And we clearly have seen the pound take a battering. There's certainly no guarantee that it won't take even more of a bashing in the days ahead. There tends to be at least some level where that auto-corrects. But it's really more important to think, well, what are the markets saying with this? If it was simply, if you look at after Brexit, for instance, you saw the graph go straight down. If you had voted against Brexit, you voted to remain, you said, well, there you go. Yeah, this goes to show this is not a good thing. But we saw the pound come up again. The pound has been weak for reasons that Gerard Lyons has also just referenced. What would worry me more than trying to guess what will happen in currency speculation would be what is being said here. Why is it?
What is being said by the markets?
What is being said by the markets? What is being said by investors? Why are they not convinced? And the big task of reassurance now goes to Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. We know they're very good at shaking things up. We know they're good at disruption. We know they intended to do this and that they factored in something like this fall in the pound. But what we don't know is that they know how to get things back on their feet again.
Amanda, have you heard what you've heard from Gerard and Anne? Has that given you any sense of reassurance about the future of the currency?
No, it hasn't, unfortunately. And I think it's just as has been said, this is all sort of uncertain and there isn't a clear kind of way forward. It just certainly doesn't feel it for people like myself who are trying to look at what they do over the next few months.
OK, thank you, Amanda. David, what level of confidence can you offer, if any?
I'm not sure I can reassure Amanda because we're in a period of great volatility. Because there is uncertainty, because the markets have, I'm afraid, lost a lot of confidence in the UK and the UK government. And I think Anne asked the right question. Why are we in this position? What are the markets telling us? And I think some of it is about taking risks with the public finances, borrowing a heck of a lot of money when times are tight and when they know that the markets are wary. I think it's also taking risks with some of our institutions, sort of undermining the Treasury, sacking the permanent Secretary of the Treasury on day one. I don't think was a good message. I think excluding the Office of Budget Responsibility, who are there to provide forecasts and make assessments, excluding them from Friday's event, sent the wrong message. I think, to be honest, some of the criticism of the way the Bank of England operates that we heard from Liz Truss as a leadership candidate and talking about changing the mandate, I don't think that sends a good signal either. And I think we've got to be careful about our institutions as well as careful about the public finances. OK.
Mick Lynch, you wouldn't be the obvious person to go to talk about the virtues of capitalism, but this is going to mean something for your members. What do you think, what do you expect to happen?
Well, I think for ordinary women and men around the country, they were worried already because of the cost of living crisis. People are worried about their rents, which are going to go up dramatically. Many people in this country are living in private rented accommodation on a buy-to-let basis, and those small landlords are going to be hit with mortgage increases. House owners are going to be hit with mortgage increases. People will be worried about maybe unemployment coming back as a result of this because businesses will be careful about what they're doing. And I think the duty of any government, of whatever stripe it is to provide some stability and some certainty so that small enterprises, sole traders who are, a very important part of the economy, but also reasonably large business who provide salaries and wages for our people to exist on, will be extremely shaky tonight. They'll be thinking, why is the global market giving a vote of no confidence in a Chancellor and a Prime Minister that just walked onto stage. And let's not forget what they've been telling us is that they're going to drive this even more radically over the next year or so. We've got what might be another fiscal statement coming up.
This is only the beginning, right?
Yeah, and then a big budget in the spring. It could be that they are completely zealot about this stuff, almost on a libertarian version of free marketeering, which we've never really had, even with fairly right-wing governments in the past. And I think a lot of people have been going, well, what kind of government have we got here? Are they trying to look after the mass of the population and create a stable economy, even if not everyone supports it? Everyone believes in stability so that they can plan for their own personal lives and plan for their businesses and their sectors. And it seems that we're going into a bit of anarchy at the moment.
I'm going to come back to Warren. Let's talk to John Bennett, because I know, John, you've got some concerns about the way this affects different kinds of people in the population, as Mick Lynch has just been talking about. The issue, I guess, of equality.
That's right. I'm a nurse and I work with some very vulnerable people. And every day I'm hearing people who are very scared, very worried about how these changes are going to impact on them. And my question to the panel is it fair during a cost of living crisis that the wealthiest minority will be the people that benefit the most from the recent tax cuts?
So your concern is really what people are calling the distribution issue here, rather than just whether it will work?
Yes, because the way the majority of people experience the economy is simply how much they get paid and how much they have to pay out for things. And those two things are getting closer and closer, and one's starting to overtake the other, which is unsustainable. It's not safe for people.
OK, thank you, John. And how important do you think this issue of distribution is? The government says it's going for growth come what may, but there are people who think what is equally important is to be seen to be fair.
It is important to be seen to be fair, and John makes the point very well. I do have a bit of a challenge to it there, because you can imagine a perfectly redistributive budget, mini-budget, fiscal event, as we were told to call it. It was a pretty big fiscal event, wasn't it? But it wouldn't necessarily work. It wouldn't help very much. It might make people feel that it was fair, but it might not be particularly effective. So if you look at that tax cut at the 45% to 40%, it's not a massively expensive outcome. It costs about $2 billion. So your problem with it is more, is it fair or is it not fair? I'm not sure that is what Quasi-Quaternion and Liz Truss are sort of shooting for with this. What they're saying is, we think that this will bring back the animal spirits. It will make people perhaps who are working 4 days think, yeah, I'll work the 5th day. People who perhaps are in a marginal tax trap. But if that itself doesn't work, then all you've got is the bad news and the unfairness point, but you haven't captured the gains. So perhaps my take on it is a bit different from John's, but I can see either way that you've got to show it works. If they can't show soon that it's worked, then I think there'll be a redoubling of the kind of criticism that John was putting.
Gerard, you were saying before that, in a way, the problem was that the Chancellor hadn't done enough or said enough or been articulate enough. But there's a more profound issue here, isn't there? That the shape of the package isn't going to be the same for everybody.
Well, I agree with that, and the question suggests that the person asking the question didn't think the top rate should have come down, and I agree with him. But I think a very important point about last Friday's package is that the energy price levy, capping energy prices, plus reversing the 2 tax increases that were previously announced, namely reversing the corporation tax increase and reversing the national insurance tax increase, which all economists agree is the tax on job. Doing all that was the bulk of the package, and that prevents a deep recession. Now, the economy is still slowing, the world economy is weakening, so everyone benefits from that. So I'm not defending what they did on the top rate of tax, but the key thing about last Friday that we're probably overlooking here is that if we had allowed a deep recession, or if they hadn't taken action to address that downside risk, we would have seen unemployment rise, public finances blown out of the water.
This is the great debate. Up next, will we end up with higher living costs and greater inequality in society, or will the tax cuts benefit everyone in the long run?
Do you have anything to say about what's going on, sir?
as the pound goes down, the inflation pressure gets greater.
What we need to hear from the government is a credible plan for the public finances and a credible plan to grow the economy.
Welcome back to The Great Debate, where we're talking about the government's economic plan and asking, is Liz Truss taking too many risks with our money? Kwasi Kwarteng's fiscal event, he called it, has been described as a budget for the better off, with Britain's top earners gaining the most in tax cuts. But does it come at the expense of ordinary people worried about how to pay their bills? Well, the Chancellor and the Prime Minister say it's worth helping the richest in order to grow the economy as a whole. Well, let's see. Let's talk to some of those ordinary citizens and see what they make of it. Julie Fay, I think you're in Tewkesbury. Julie,
I am.
What do you think about this question of how it feels for the ordinary person?
It feels very direct for the ordinary person. I live in a small, well, growing market town, rural market town. My daughter is at university in her second year, and she is worried about the bills that are going to be coming her way. I'm worried she's going to just get cold and not look after herself because she's worried about those bills. I see our food bank and lots of other initiatives being very, very necessary parts of life now. And I've seen crops rotting in the fields because there's nobody there to pick them because of the government's immigration policy. Now, we can talk fiscal policy and, you know, all the pros and cons of the different things. But at the end of the day, if we lose track of basic human needs, of basic human dignity and equity, then we really have lost the plot.
Julie, thank you very much indeed. I wonder if we can talk to Stephen Fairley, who's in Bathgate in Scotland. Stephen, we've spoken before. What do you make of it?
I'm the same. I think that we are going to be greatly impacted with the current crisis regarding especially energy. As a family ourselves, we've looked to cut our energy usage by unplugging and removing appliances, turning off standby appliances each night, washing clothes at lower temperatures. It's all common sense things that we want to do to try and make sure that we can make ends meet. With the upcoming autumn and winter months, we're looking to cut our gas bills by turning off radiators that we don't use, draft-proofing doors and windows, turning down our thermostats and our water temperature. I mean, these are drastic measures to try and get us through the colder months, and there's a possibility that it still won't be enough. So living with this constant fear of not being able to heat our home will not go away until this government can assist with the cost of living crisis.
Stephen, I was in Scotland over the weekend. Besides the temperature difference, what do you think how do you think this is going to go down north of the border?
Like a lead balloon, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, Scotland doesn't really have many powers with regards to their energy policy. We do have some, but not enough. And I think that our First Minister has spoken greatly about it in the past, saying that if we did have more powers, they might have even called for an emergency budget to try and help and assist people like myself. So that would have been something that we would have liked done going forward.
OK, thank you, Stephen. Anne, the issue here is both the Chancellor and actually now famously Prime Minister have said they know something's going to be unpopular. But it's beginning to feel like it could be so unpopular, it's untenable, unsustainable.
I suppose they think that they're in for a rock and roll ride. They can give it a little bit longer to feed through. And what we haven't really reflected, in fairness to the government, Trevor, is the size of that energy relief package. I was just having a look, because I spent a lot of time in Europe, continental Europe, and it is really, really big. I mean, it's an outlier in terms of the size and the duration of that. So, of course, your view is that you're speaking from...
Which is the cap
panel here,
plus the £400, which they promised before.
And this long duration of it, which, convenient enough, seems to take us about up to the next election or the period before.
It's for 2 years.
Funny that. There's 18 months plus, but plus minus, after that. But that is really big. So I do think that the government has to get some credit for that. If, on the other hand, you're going to say, well, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have cut taxes here, and you've taken all these other risks. They are on a seesaw, aren't they? Do they start to get credit as people say, well, OK, looking around, people are not great sometimes at looking outside our own borders, but these are issues which are affecting the whole of Europe. This energy crisis, cost of living crisis. Germany today, Business Outlook says it's going to be a sharp recession. It's quite funny when you look at it, and it's as if we're not aware of that. The government may at some point be able to say, this is not just us. But right now, it feels as if the heat is only on them.
Anne's given us context, David Gauke, but you've been Chief Secretary of the Treasury. You've had to make these big decisions. Now, this is like a massive decision. And I guess the question about this one is whether it's basically a kamikaze mission by the government. That the decision they've taken will be so unpopular that they won't last.
Well, it's a huge political risk they have taken in going for the additional rate. No one was particularly calling for it. I think it's a mistake. I happen to believe that we should have competitive rates for internationally mobile people because you want to attract talent and high-earning people to come here, live here and pay taxes here. But the issue that we face over the course of the winter, as we've heard, is going to be really tough. And, we are going to see, even with the generous support package that the government has set out, by the way, I'd prefer if it was more targeted to help the poorest, but it is a big package. But even so, a lot of people are going to find this winter really hard. And in that environment, that's precisely the wrong time to be providing a tax cut to the wealthiest.
Mick, what we're hearing is how difficult it's going to be. And you said this in part one. One of the things that you've been saying, along with some other trade union colleagues, is there needs to be coordinated action, strikes and so on, which brings people to think, oh, are we back in 1979? Is this going to be a winter of discontent where the Labour movement attempts to bring down the government? Is this the moment for the kind of thing that you've been saying to strike? A government that's weak, unpopular, people who want something different?
Well, we can't bring down the government. The Tories party is capable enough of bringing down the government. They do it quite often, it seems to me. So maybe we won't get time to do that. I think it looks awful. People were expecting some assistance for ordinary men and women, people on modest pay and low pay, and it looks completely callous. That's what it looks like I was at the Labour Party at the weekend, a lot of Labour delegates, lots of people from Liverpool coming out. They are extraordinarily angry about what's gone on. And it just looks like they don't care. It looks like they're disconnected from the feeling in the country. I think the country is ready for a change. I think they're expecting a bit of redistribution. Now, there's lots of arguments how you do that, and you don't have to be a radical socialist to say, I can do something with tax thresholds, I can take people out of tax. They could have taxed the energy companies directly and said to them, we don't need all these market prices. Much of the oil and gas is coming from UK sources, UK waters. They could have said to them, unless you control that price yourself, we're going to tax you to the hilt. They haven't done any of it. It looks like, and it will be, a transfer of wealth from ordinary people to the uber-rich, and I think that will be resented for a very long time.
You may not be able to say it exactly, but there's quite a lot of support for that point of view on the wall here. But let me talk to somebody who, in the end, may have to pay or benefit from this. Jamie Martin. Jamie, you've been with us before. I think that last time we spoke you were 16 and you're now 17. Happy belated birthday. Yeah. You've got a point you wanted to make.
Yeah, well, thank you for the birthday messages, first of all. Yeah, I'm 17. I've got, however long to think about potentially paying bills, that are going to be ridiculously high. And that is something that I've now got to worry about massively alongside lots of other things as well as, working and school and other things. So for younger people, I think that this news that's coming out of higher energy bills or just higher cost of living, it's a massive setback, and it's going to leave a lot of people in the dark, and they're going to be left in a kind of a spiral, a downward spiral in a debt trap.
And you had a question
for generations to come.
You had a question for our panel, Jamie, coming out of that.
Yeah, the question from me was, why should my generation be burdened with this debt?
Gerard.
OK, I think there needs to be a sort of reassessment. People are getting, I think, too pessimistic. It's right to be concerned. The world economy is slowing. We've heard about the European economy slowing. The UK economy is slowing. We've been hit by a combination of shocks. But the level of debt in the UK, even though it's high, is still not as high to make us worried about the longer term. If we put up the ratio of debt to GDP, it's about 90%. It's the second lowest in the G7. Now, after the Second World War, the ratio of debt, to just give you a comparison, that same ratio was 250%, 2.5 times the size of the economy, far higher than it is now in relation to where we are. And the way it came down then was through economic growth. And in answer to this question, the government has 4 options at the end of the day. You grow your way out of it. You have austerity, we don't want that. You raise taxes, we don't want that. Or you borrow. In the near term, you borrow, but the only way to really make sure that younger generations don't pay it, you grow it. That's why we have to have a pro-growth economic strategy.
OK, I'll come back to that. In fact, I think we have somebody who wants to come in here who does actually share some of that point of view. Chris Roberts, on the Isle of Man. Chris, what's your view about this generational issue?
Well, I don't regard the current economic situation as simply a political problem. My view is it is the nation actively living beyond its means, with no regard to prioritising what's necessary and what's not. An example, food and energy first, holidays and socialising second, if you will. No government of any complexion can be expected to constantly support unrealistic lifestyles without ruin of the nation's economic future. It's a bigger problem than just politics. I think the general public and we as a nation need to face up to the situation we're in and not just expect the government to give away money every time, we can't pay a bill.
OK, let me stay with us, Chris, but let me just go back to Jamie. To paraphrase what Chris has just said, we're a nation living beyond our means and we've got to grow up.
Well, I mean, yeah, potentially. I mean, but this is a case of it's OK saying we've got to grow up, but I suppose as a country we face a lot of problems and we're going to forever, of course. But, as it was mentioned earlier, we've got to think long term. And I don't think what's really happening now is thinking long term, to be completely honest. And, it's not just my generations, but, my kids, my grandkids, they're going to be paying off future debts and things for short investments we've made now, so I think we've got to think long term a bit more often, to be completely honest. But, yeah, I think everything's short term in politics now.
Jamie, thank you very much indeed. Stay with us on The Great Debate. Up next, we're going to get an update from our data and economics editor, Ed Conway, about the state of the markets and the Bank of England's next move. Welcome back to The Great Debate, where we're talking about the government's economic plan and asking, is Liz Truss taking too many risks with our money? Well, the Chancellor may not want to comment on the markets, but they've certainly had a lot to say about him and his economic plan. Our data and economics editor, Ed Conway, has this analysis of the day. The pound hit its lowest ever level against the dollar.
It has been another roller coaster day in markets, all reacting still to this well, mini-budget, certainly more than a mini-budget, wasn't it? And as far as markets are concerned, well, the reaction has been very big indeed. This chart shows you the pound against the US dollar. The higher the line is, the stronger the pound is. And this is just going back to last Thursday. You can see it was around $1.14, 13, $1.12 perhaps at the time of Kwasi Kwarteng's speech. But look at what happened afterwards. To the pound against the dollar, it fell until today. That's the weekend there, that line. And now we can see what happened in early trading in Asia. It went down and then gradually came up a little bit. There was speculation the Bank of England was going to step in and potentially do something. Instead, we just got a statement from the bank. And as far as markets were concerned, maybe that wasn't really enough because they fell a little bit further. The pound fell. But it's worth just focusing on this bit. The pound getting to the lowest level it's been against the dollar ever. Going all the way back, I'll show you this chart. That chart is just showing you the last few days. This one shows you the last century and a bit, going back to 1870. Again, the pound against the dollar used to be about $5.50, over $5 for each pound. Through the gold standard era, that was a period of pound strength. Then you had World War I, that kind of gold standard era coming to an end. There is the moment that the UK left the gold standard in 1931, a major economic crisis. And you can see that as each of these crises happens, 1949 devaluation, you've got the 1976 bailout, the pound getting weaker and weaker through history. There is the 1985 Plaza Accord. That was the last moment the pound was quite as weak against the dollar as it is now. And then you had 1992 ERM exit, 2016 EU referendum, and now today, a moment of history, really, with the pound getting to the weakest level that we've ever seen against the US dollar. But it's not just in currencies where we have seen an impact here. Also, consider the government borrowing rates, the rates that they have to pay on their debt. And this really matters because they've just committed to borrowing a lot more of that debt. That's decided in bond markets. This is showing you it's the 10-year government bond yield. Basically, it's the interest rate that they and we as taxpayers have to pay. And going back over the last year, you can see how much it's tipped up recently. But you only get a sense of just how the UK is doing versus other countries around the world when you add them on. So there's Germany, there's France, there's the US. And what you can perhaps just about make out, if you look at that red line, the UK, we used to be more or less in line with other countries. And now suddenly, in the last week or so, UK rates of borrowing, interest rates on government debt have spiked up. It's getting more expensive. Basically, people out there are saying, we're going to charge you higher interest rates for your debt, which is not trivial given the government has just committed to borrowing a lot more money. That's for the government, but what about for the rest of us? What about for households? Because, of course, the Bank of England sets those rates. Well, they are having to do something similar. This shows you Bank of England interest rate. And here, we're not looking back in time, we're looking forward in time towards the future to get a sense of what people in markets expect to happen with interest rates. And just for a kind of recap, not long ago, the start of this year, in February, they were expecting them to peak at 1.5%. That changed later on in the year. By August, they were expecting 2.75%. But look at how things changed after Liz Truss was elected leader of the Conservative Party. 4.75%. You see how they're starting to mount those expectations for what's happening in mortgage rates. But just today, look at that line, up at 6%, the highest that's been for many, many years. And that's not trivial. First of all, because a 6% interest rate at today's high levels of debt is a big impact. And second of all, because mortgage lenders are already looking at this and deciding whether they can lend at the levels that they have today, already cancelling some of their mortgage offers right now. This is already starting to bear on many households around the country.
OK, that was Ed Conway, and we've heard from him about today. Let's go to see what Tariq Ali's reaction to it all was in Doncaster. Good evening, Tariq.
Good evening to you. Apart from making millionaires even richer, can the panel tell us of any examples in the world where trickle-down economics has actually worked, please?
Oh, well, that's interesting. Trickle-down economics, and that's what you think's been happening this weekend?
Yeah.
OK. David Gauke, got any examples?
Well, it depends what you define as trickle-down economics. Look, I mean, I've made the point, I think this was the wrong approach to cut the top rate of tax in this budget or this fiscal event. And I think the focus should have been on helping those who needed the support the most. It is the case that you want to have an economy that attracts talent there, that attracts investment, Whether you call that trickle-down or not is up to you. But I think that's, you've got competitive economies with low taxes in some places, but it's not the only thing that matters. And I just want to come back to this point about growth, because growth is right, and Gerard mentioned it. But you won't get growth if you lose the market's confidence in your fiscal position. So we're likely to see interest rates going up over the next couple of years. That will hurt growth. And there are things that we can do to help with growth, some of which were set out, but it's not just about taxes. We could, for a start, try to improve our relationship with our biggest trading market. So we bring down some of the trade barriers that we've now put in place with the European Union. That would be something that would help growth straight away.
Of course, the government might say you're still fighting the last war on that,
It's still an important matter. It still really is hampering our growth, and I know people don't like talking about it, or some people don't like talking about it, but it's absolutely relevant to how we can turn our economy round, sort out that relationship with the European Union.
OK. And McElvoy, I mean, there is a framework here which says that we need to encourage wealth creators. We need to attract people who get paid a lot of money but are very creative and innovative and so on. And there's been a lot of talk over the weekend about the Barber Dash for Growth way back in 1972. Now, this is not that. But can you call to mind examples where this idea that what you try to do is to promote growth by essentially giving some people who are especially good at creating wealth, some advantages in the way that they've done this on last Friday?
Oh, yeah, there are loads of examples of that. And I think trickle-down economics is often used as a sort of... It's already got a framing of people who don't like it very much. It's sort of bad marketing of lower tax, pro-growth policies. So you could look around the world, you could say a lot of successful East Asian economies have done some form of that. Singapore's the Singapore on Thames. Remember, we're supposed to be Singapore on Thames here in London. Well, let's see. But, that's a good example where you make it very attractive for people to come, to set up businesses. There are other problems, I think, with Singapore as a society, but not being attractive on tax is not one of them. Reagan, you're old enough just about to remember Ronald Reagan there, Trevor? Morning in America, the Reagan boom. That's also where this aversion to it, I think, comes from across parts of the left. But also, if you look to countries like Poland, if you look to lots of places will try to come up with something more attractive to get tech hubs. So Estonia, let me give an example because it's a nice country. Estonia, even Latvia, the Baltic states have tried very hard to keep top tax down to attract the most innovative, those who will power growth. To that extent, I think we should give that poor old trickle-down economics, the badly marketed phase, a bit of a chance.
OK, thank you, Anne. Let's go to the wall now and talk to Judith Randall. Judith, Anne and to some extent David have been telling us that there are examples where the idea that you push for growth by encouraging wealth creation and so on, that they've been successful in other places. Are you at all convinced that that's a possibility here?
I'm really concerned that we're looking at this from the wrong angle. And I'm concerned that what has happened is really pushing the country so much that there's potential for civil unrest and that the nation is effectively standing on a cliff edge. The country is being burdened with debt and no plan exists to balance finances. And failure to put a windfall tax on energy companies is, to me, inexplicable.
You can't see this, Judith, but there are quite a lot of other people who are on our viewers' panel who are applauding that. Let me come back in the studio here. Gerard, Lyons, worry about civil unrest. Do you understand why somebody would feel that way?
Well, obviously, we need to take all these concerns seriously. I think the important thing is the jobs market is still very healthy, and that's good. It's vital in any country, whether it's Britain or elsewhere, to look after always those people in need and in difficulty. And you do that through the overall tax welfare benefit system. So that's pretty key. On top of that, though, what one sees in the UK is that, thankfully, we have a very progressive tax system. So if we take income tax, the top 1% of people who pay income tax pay about 30% of the tax collected. the top 10% pay 50%. So it's very progressive. So naturally, if you cut taxes, then those people benefit. But coming back to the question, it's vital to ensure the economy doesn't weaken. So far, those measures have been good. We can talk about the distribution aspect, but I think the key thing is, for the moment, the jobs market is still very healthy.
All right.
So that will keep some of those fears at ease, but we shouldn't be dismissive of these concerns.
All right, thank you very much. Coming up, it's less than a month since Liz Truss took office. She's voted in by 82,000 Conservative Party members. Does she really have a mandate for what she wants to do?
I give notice that Liz Truss is elected as the leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party.
As your party leader, I intend to deliver what we promised those voters right across our great country.
Welcome back to The Great Debate, where we're talking about the government's bold plan to boost economic growth and asking, is Liz Truss taking too many risks with our money? Well, 3 weeks into the job, and the new Prime Minister's wasted no time in unveiling the biggest package of tax cuts for 50 years. But she spent the summer talking to Conservative Party members who, after all, were the people who elected her. So how could she be sure that this is what the British people as a whole want? Let's go to our viewers panel and talk to an old friend, Ron Knox. Ron, what's your view on that, the democratic question?
My question is there a mandate for radical change? And does the country require a general election to do it?
Mick, there's the question. Let me make sure we've got it down. Last question from Ron. Basically, is it time to call a general election? What do you think?
I think it is. I don't think there is a mandate for what we're seeing. This is a really radical turn in policy and approach. I think it's verging on the libertarian. I don't think anyone voted for that. Nobody expected these two characters to be in these positions at this time. The Labour Party is getting itself ready to fight an election, I think, and you've now got a distinction between those bodies we haven't seen for a while. I think it would be good for the country, and addressing this issue about division. Trickle-down will cause massive divisions in this society, and I think it could be really serious. We need to settle that through a properly argued election campaign where all the bodies, including the Liberals and whoever, can get their stuff on the table, argue it through in forums like this and all the others that we have, and then the country can make a decision about how they want to approach economic and social policy. And I don't think we've had that properly, and we can't leave it to those people in those golf clubs that have settled this election in the last couple of weeks.
Gerard, Lyons.
I would approach it as an economist in a different way. Since the global financial crisis in 2008, we, in Western Europe, including the UK, have settled in to a low-growth environment. 10 years ago, the UK Treasury told the then coalition government, because of weak growth, to get the public finances into shape, we needed austerity. I argued against that. That was wrong. They used the Treasury 2 years ago, said weak growth, to get the finances into shape, we need higher taxes. That was wrong. Now we have a government that's saying we need a pro-growth strategy. And I agree that the next election has to be about...
But should that next election be coming soon?
No, I think basically we need to just try and stabilise the economy now and get the growth up. And in 2 years' time, we're going to have a real fight. But from an economic perspective, whoever is in power, we need a pro-growth strategy built on investment and productivity.
David?
Well, I'm not an enthusiast for this government, but constitutionally we have a parliamentary system. As long as the Prime Minister has got the support of Parliament, they can carry on until the end of the term. But does it cause that government political problems? Yeah, absolutely it does. And there are things that they won't be able to get through the House of Lords, they won't be able to get through Parliament. And you know, if you pursue an agenda that doesn't have public support, then you will pay the price at the next general election. So constitutionally, it doesn't have to be done, but it's a politically risky strategy to depart from the mandate that they had at the last general election.
1.5 for, 1 against. What do you think? General election now?
I'm going to say no. I'm going to disappoint the questioner because we do have a situation, the way that we're set up in Britain between elections, that the mandate that you get if you change government, you can change your government without always having to go to a general election, which, don't forget, is also a disruption of its own. We saw it happen from Gordon Brown taking over from Tony Blair. I'm sure the charge will be this is far more radical. We've already heard that from Mick. That is true. But I think Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng are coming with something so new, so different. We'll see pretty quickly whether it works or not. I think it's a fairer next election to be able to judge them on that and vote accordingly.
Thank you all very much. That is all we have time for this evening. And it just remains for me to thank our panellists here in the studio, David Gauke, Gerard Lyons, Mick Lynch and Anne McElvoy. As always, it's you at home who are at the centre of our conversation. And if you'd like to be part of the programme next time, get in touch. Email thegreatdebate@sky.uk. And for now, I want to thank everybody on tonight's viewers panel for taking part. And keep talking at home. We'll be with you again at the same time next week for The Great Debate.